I've had the great satisfaction of being in charge of the program to upgrade Mirage right the way through. And it's on this machine that I've put in the most part of my flight hours with Mirage 3. There's an emotion, because between the pilot and the Mirage, it could be nothing else other than a passionate and enthralling love story. It's love at first sight when you glimpse these perfect aesthetics, those strong thoroughbred lines which then takes you on an incredible ride through the infinity of space, so high, close up to the stars, just to the very point where the sky becomes black. And in fact, one of the main characteristics of this airplane is that it's very demanding. It's a difficult plane to pilot. It needs to be approached cautiously, with a lot of prudence. It needs to be fussed over, and most importantly, it needs to be shown a great deal of respect. Once you've got that right, it becomes an extraordinary mount that'll be faithful to you even in the most difficult of circumstances, and one really begins to wonder if somewhere within these 8 tons there hasn't been hidden in some small part a soul. And it's true that there's a bond of understanding that ties itself between the pilot and the Mirage 3. The beauty of aviation is that it takes place in an environment in which you move through freely, but it's fundamentally a hostile environment, because man wasn't designed to fly. This challenge, this dream of Icarus in a way, every day it's reborn. You get another look at the world out there, another way to look at things. The things that appeared extremely important to you yesterday when you left your office will seem unimportant when you land your plane. Every flight, you learn a little more about yourself. The emotions that you experience, the sights you discover, are of an intensity so incredibly different from what you've experienced to on the ground. It's hard even to describe it, unless you are as talented as someone like the writer Saint-Exupéry. There's something unexplainable that accompanies the life of a pilot, and in particular, a fighter pilot. The acquisition of the Mirage 3 gave us an important push forward in the development of the Air Force. In one fell swoop, this plane projected us into a category of flying which virtually doesn't recognize limits, with a speed twice that of sound, a flight ceiling of practically 23 kilometers, 23,000 meters. At the same time, we have the capability of flying at low altitudes, avoiding radar. It should be said, though, that in bad weather, it's not easy to do. It demands lots of training. But the technical possibilities are there. In the end, it's a plane that offers us basically incredible opportunities. In a fighter pilot's or test pilot's job, the workload in the cockpit is really too heavy to leave too much time simply to lie back and appreciate the poetry of flight. The poetry of flying, in my opinion, that comes from the breadth of sensations, and especially from this relationship, this fusion between the pilot and the machine. This, in the end, is the strongest sensation. It's this team which, thanks to one of them, the man, constantly puts itself in question, then proves itself again by mastering these 10, 20 or however many tons of steel that returns intact to the ground after completing what are more or less complex missions. I don't believe that this is all about the conquest of man over machine. It's the conquest of man over himself. The problems that were posed by the mountains are essentially problems affecting our final maneuvers. Since we have airfields that lie in the heart of the Alps, we're obliged to rely upon our instruments for landing following the sharpest of descents. As in Meiringen or Turtman, for example, in bad weather, using the instruments and radar to land with a slope of 11 degrees, with a Mirage 3, it's no joke. It's true. Seriously, we were happy to have a braking parachute to give us a little help in coming to a stop before the end of the runway. Those people that think that a country like Switzerland is too small to justify the acquisition of high-performance fighter planes are people that only think in two dimensions. But I suppose that's normal, as I don't see how someone who hasn't had the opportunity of piloting could possibly begin to think in three dimensions. Now, aviation, that's in three dimensions. There's the dimension of altitude. That's the fundamental dimension. Then me, I would say that the smaller a country, the more need there is to respect its borders. So the more important is the performance of jet fighters. If you must intercept an airplane that flies across a small country like Switzerland, that leaves you very little time. Therefore, I would say that the smaller the size of the airspace, once again I underline it in three dimensions, it's restricted, the more performance of your machine must be remarkable, and that involves the capacity for acceleration and the capacity to climb. The Mirage 3S, which we bought, were more of an interceptor, intended to fend off the worst of opponents at this point of the Cold War. It should be said that strategic bombers at the time could move quickly and at very high altitudes. Lately, the threat has evolved as well, so we've focused more and more about training on close-to-hand aerial fights. We call these dogfights, with exercises 1 against 1, 2 against 2, 2 against 4, etc. These were asking a lot of the pilot, and they were really risking defeat. The quality of the pilot was almost as important as the quality of the plane.
Heading 160, climb flight level 100.
Left heading 160, climbing flight level 100, Tiger 25.
Snake, level 100, tied on.
Snake.
Cooking 6100. 208, extra.
Cold, tracking north. Bandit turning hot, 055, 12 miles, tracking 180 and right turn. 060, 10 miles. Theater, the Bandit is now 0706 miles, turning opposite to you. Theater, 0802 miles. Go before crossing slightly south.
Okay, Bailey, on cockpit. Okay, we go.
Now going low and direct to west to right.
The one to the engine, okay, coming to the left. I'm in.
Going with you.
Alarming. Please hit the seat, Achtung, alarming, really.
Your name for the gyro in yourself. On the gyro, in the left turn, flight level
In training for aerial combat, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. Whether you're in a Mirage, an FA-18 or an F-5, the difference isn't big, especially if you make the same kind of maneuvers. Your spinal column will take almost all the force, and really that's not very good for the ultimate health of the pilot.
Left side, low, crossing. Western.
On the north on the single pitch. I was the same guy, Eva.
Oh, sorry.
The pilot that's locked into aerial combat needs to face up to taking decisions, well, you could pretty much say on a continual basis. It all depends on the behavior of his opponent, to then readjust his tactics, all his combat plans, and that's very exacting in an aerial fight. The decisions follow on from each other at a rapid pace, and this all takes, well, it can last 20 minutes. It varies, rightly, according to the quality of the opponent, and can sometimes lead to extremes, as there can be times when there's very little time to relax. But nonetheless, during a flight, mere moments of time can be very, very intense, as well as physically taxing, because this is all linked to a really rather strong acceleration. I'm thinking most about the G-force when taking curves. There's a lot. On a flight of 45 minutes, there's maybe just a few seconds when a pilot can take a breath and look around and admire the beauty that surrounds him. But the rest of it, it's hard work. It's a job that demands a lot mentally, it's a job that demands a lot physically. It's not a walk in the park. Due to the complexity and possibilities offered today by the FA-18, from the navigation standpoint, it's less important that the pilot have a geographical knowledge than when all this started. And there I'm going back further than the Mirage. I'm thinking about the Venom, where you had no instruments, where you had to navigate with a map, and where you had to know every little hamlet in the country. Today it's less important in the training of a pilot, with less priority put on geography and on this type of knowledge. But a lot more weight is put on the understanding of the information technology and arms systems which this machine has to offer. One always has sentimental feelings for the Mirage. So, as for the F5, I've not one regret. I think even more so of the Mirage. It'll be with me. It'll be under my skin to the very end. There is a respect towards an old person. It's exaggerated. A mirage isn't just a thing, but more like someone you know, someone you've walked alongside. In the end, all you want to see is the mirage again in a well-kept museum where it's well looked after, where once again you can look over it for a long time, rediscover its smell, rediscover its touch. It's an aeroplane that has to be experienced. The Mirage has the same wing style as the Concorde. And when you talk about Concorde to absolutely anyone, you notice that there's still something fascinating about it today. Those who have had the opportunity to cross the Atlantic and to fly supersonic, their experience is something unforgettable. And I believe that the Mirage pilot has the same relationship with his airplane. It'll become a plane of legends, like Concorde will be in civil aviation, a legendary aeroplane. For my part, it's been more than 10 years, more than 1,000 flight hours. Even if it's only a piece of metal, you can't be indifferent. And I believe that this separation will be hard enough. Because when they definitively shut the page of the Mirage, it'll be an important chapter in the history of aviation that will close.